Let's get started. Today is actually a special day. So I want to start with that. And someone actually asked about why is it a special day, so I want to address it. Today is known as Purim Katan. Purim Katan literally means a small Purim. So how does that work? The Kleinchika Purim in Yiddish, you would say. The miniature Purim. You see, we find ourselves this year in a leap year. Meaning that usually a year has 12 months, but this year has 13 months. On the Jewish calendar, it's a Jewish leap year. And, interesting thing, if you want to just practically see what that means up until this point of the year, all the Jewish holidays were considered early on the secular calendar. Hanukkah was considered early. Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot were considered early. Starting from Purim and Pesach, obviously, it's going to be considered late because we add a full month. So basically, that's the way we adjust it. So had this year not been a leap year, so today would have been Purim. Okay, that's how it works. Now, why is that significant? Okay, but it's not. It's a leap year, so why is it? Basically, we make the Purim, we celebrate Purim in the second Adar, not in the first. So it's just an interesting thing, today is the 12th month. In a month from today will be the 13th month. You see, the Jewish calendar, when considering the first, second, third month, we start from the month of Pesach, the month of Nisan, the month of Passover. So in the Megillah, in the story of Purim, it constantly says that the miracle took place in the 12th month. So today is the 12th month. But obviously, this year is a leap year, so we celebrate it a month later. There aren't a lot of halachic significances for today. In other words, there's not really customs or traditions that are done. Some people say that you should have an extra meal. Some people say you should have or eat a little bit or drink a little bit more. But there aren't a lot of halachic requirements, which is a very interesting thing, because being that it doesn't have halachic requirements, this is what I want to quote for you what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is a code of Jewish law. We learn from it every single week. So in halakha it says like this. It says, although there's no obligation to celebrate today this miniature Purim, nevertheless, and he quotes a verse in Hebrew, V'toiv leiv mishta tamid, nevertheless, a person should always be happy. Even though you don't have any requirement for joy, you should always be happy. So it's interesting, the Rabbi points out something beautiful to say. You see, all other special dates of the year have a requirement to be happy, have a obligation, a mitzvah to be happy. Purim, right? You drink wine to be happy. Obviously, Sukkot, the same thing, all the holidays, Shabbos as well. Here you have a day that there's no requirement to be happy. That's why it sort of becomes like the Rosh Hashanah, like the head of the year for pure joy, for joy that isn't coming because of requirement, but coming from who you are. You understand? As long as simcha, as long as joy is coming from a mitzvah, a requirement, then it's not your default setting, put it that way. It's something that you're sort of adding to yourself. Today represents a day of pure joy. There's no obligation, no requirement, but nevertheless, halacha writes, you should always be happy. You know why? Because this day represents joy without any requirements. Just default joy, pure joy. Let me just use a little bit more words to explain that. When joy is connected to a mitzvah, so it's like I'm happy. Why? Because I'm doing a mitzvah. When it comes a day like today, we're reminded we're happy because we're happy. In other words, the default setting of a Jew, living as a Jew, maybe you might want to say always connected to Hashem, that's where it comes from, but we're always happy, not only as a result of doing a mitzvah, but as we live. So that's why today is a special day, the miniature Purim, representing joy for the whole year. Let's get to the parsha. Parsha is a very interesting parsha. In many ways, you might want to say a very difficult parsha, but one thing's for sure, it's a very dramatic parsha. It's the parsha of the Chet HaEgel, of the golden calf. I do remember a year ago, last year, we were learning this week's parsha in the small room, and we had a very lively discussion about it. I remember what came out of it, but let's see where it takes us this week and this year. So Parshat Ki Sisa is organized very interestingly. In other words, the aliyahs You mentioned Aliyah, Glenn, right? It's very disproportionate. Usually, you take a parsha, you divide it more or less evenly, not completely, but more or less, into 7. 7 people get called up on Shabbos. That's how every Shabbos 7 people are called up. This week's parsha, is the bar mitzvah this week?
No, it's in March.
It's in March. Okay, but the aliyahs in this week's parsha work like this. The first aliyah is pretty big. The second aliyah is very big. Third one is short. Fourth one is short. Fifth one is short. See, they're very short. It's almost like the first aliyahs are the ones, the heaviest ones, exactly. And it's in that second aliyah, that long second one, where the whole story, an episode of the golden calf is described, and a little bit of the aftermath of it. And the reason for that is a fascinating reason with a very beautiful lesson. You see, on Shabbos, when we give out the aliyahs, the first aliyah and the second aliyah every week goes to the Kohen and to the Levite. Now, we're going to see in this week's Torah portion that it's the Kohen and the Levite, that whole tribe, the tribe of Levi, the Kohanim and the Levites, they're both from the tribe of Levi. They were not involved in the sin of the golden calf. So you want someone from that tribe that was not involved at all standing there during the aliyah. You understand? Because if it would be part of any of the other aliyahs, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, where everyone could go get an aliyah, then in a way it's a little bit of teasing. Because you're basically reading a portion that's it's dishonorable, disrespectful to the Jewish people. But if you read it when a Levi is standing there, if a Levi is getting the aliyah, the Levi's family was not involved in this whole episode.
What tribe was Aaron from?
Tribe of Levi. So we'll see. You want to know what his defense was? We'll see. Let's wait till we get to the story. Yeah. Anyone has a question? I thought someone picked up their hand. Yes.
It may seem a little crazy, but when we talked about leaving Egypt, there were a certain amount of Jews who didn't want to leave, and God took care of them. In this instant, why wouldn't He handle it the same way? Does that make?
Yeah, I understand.
Wait, he did, didn't he?
No.
Not really. A little bit. We'll see how this works. But I do, although we're a little bit jumping ahead because we didn't yet share the story, but you're giving me an opportunity to put something down as a groundwork, as a foundation, which is, at this point, it's post-Sinai, meaning He already chose them as His people.
Okay.
At that point was before that. It's a fundamental difference. When you say it's after the giving of the Torah at Sinai, these are His people, and that's why He forgives them. That's why, everything that we're going to be learning today, you should bear in mind that this is after Sinai. So it's after He already chose them as His people.
Right.
Charlotte, I think you live... Okay, good. So let's get started. The beginning of the parsha, we're going to get a lot of details in even before the story of the golden calf. So it starts like this. It starts with the prohibition of counting Jewish people. That when Jews are counted, they should not be counted by number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but rather every Jew should contribute and donate a half a shekel, a coin. You count the coins, and that's how you make a census. That's how you get the number of Jews. And so this week's parsha begins with the mitzvah of counting Jews, and that's the way it should be done. It should not be done by regular way of counting, but rather everyone should donate a half of a shekel, very very particular, half of a shekel. The idea of the half of a shekel is that every Jew realizes that without another Jew, we're only half. Without each other, we're only half. And obviously, without God, we're only half. So we only give a half of a shekel. And that's how we count the Jewish people. Then we're introduced to another thing, a new vessel of the temple. You see, up until this point, we spoke about all the vessels, but we didn't mention one because this one is considered like a preparation to the service. It was an urn, like it's called a kior, a big urn of water with like faucets. And the Kohen, before doing the service every day, would have to wash his hands and feet. That's before going into the service, he would wash his hands and feet. That's why also every morning, when we wake up in the morning, we're supposed to wash our hands. We wash our hands sort of recognizing that we are also starting our service. And we started just like the Kohen does in this week's Parsha by washing our hands. We're going to focus today, please pass it on. We're going to focus today also on the idea of washing hands before eating. right? Like before eating bread. The idea of washing hands. So today's second segment of halacha, we're going to be speaking primarily about that. The next thing we have is that up until now we know what to be built. We know that after it's going to be built, who's going to do the service in it? Aaron and his children, the Kohanim. But we don't know who's going to build it. Right? We don't know who's fit to build it. So God tells Moshe that a person by the name of Bezalel. Who was this Bezalel? Bezalel was actually a young boy at this time, but he's very, very talented. And to read the words, I'm going to be quoting from the pasuk, the verse, quoted in number 2. And I have imbued him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with insight, and with knowledge, and with talent for all manner of craftsmanship. So here you have a boy, a very young boy, who was very capable, and he was basically the lead architect you might want to say God was the architect who gave all the measurements, but who actually saw the work being done, that was this boy Bezalel. We know a little bit about his family, quite a bit actually, but we'll put that aside. If we have a chance, maybe we'll mention it later. Now we get into the story. To appreciate the story of the golden calf, I made a timeline. You open up, you'll see the timeline. I made a similar one in the past, but I fixed it up a little this year. I'm trying every year to add a little more, to make it a little bit more correct, more accurate. And basically, this timeline begins from the giving of the Torah, which we celebrated on our calendar on Shavuos, all the way until after Yom Kippur. So you see the dates that are in gray. Those are the dates that are considered the special dates of this event. So it starts with the giving of the Torah, which actually was on a Shabbos. That's why in the boxes I got that one right. That the 6th day of Sivan, the giving of the Torah. The 7th day of Sivan, the next day, Moshe goes up the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights to study the Torah. So you see the next gray box is the 16th day of Tammuz. The Jews mistakenly miscalculated. Now, I've said that idea in the past, but I want to take a moment now to explain what was their miscalculation. What, did they not realize what 40 days and 40 nights is? So actually, Moshe had a very particular approach to how to count 40 days and 40 nights. I'm sure there's a depth to this that I'm not aware of, but I just want to say it as it is. And then it goes like this. That Moshe considered 40 days and 40 nights, it had to be complete and whole, solid days. So the day that he went up was not a complete day because he wasn't up there for the full day. He went up there in the morning, and the Jewish day starts the night before. So when he went up, he did not expect that day to be counted. So 40 days and 40 nights would start from the next night, the night after he went up. The Jews counted from when he left. So they finished the count, and they say, hey, what happened? Where's Moses? And to add a little bit, the Midrashim, our sages, actually go elaborate on this a lot, but what I'm sharing with you today is primarily from Rashi, which is the lead commentator, so we always rely on Rashi. And Rashi is simple understanding. Rashi says that day, the Jews looked up to heaven, and it looked like there was a storm. They sort of envisioned, or they imagined, that this storm that they're looking at in heaven, and it's very cloudy, very dark, must be because Moses died. If it's 40, they're doing a little bit of math, right? 40 days and 40 nights, he's not here. And they see a commotion, they see noise, they see darkness, they see blackness. They said, this is terrible, he must have died. So what are they going to do? So they come to the two people who are in charge. You see, when Moses left, he didn't just leave and say, okay, I'll be back in 40 days and 40 nights. He put two people in charge, his brother Aaron and his nephew Hur. Just a little bit into, you might remember the name Hur. Hur was one of the people who held up Moshe's hand when they were fighting against Amalek. You remember Moshe needed his hands to be held up in order as long as his hands were up, they were winning the war. When his hands were weak, then they were losing the war. So he needed two people to hold him. His nephew Hur was holding his hand, holding up his hand. Remember that story? It's in the end of Parshas Beshalach. So they come to Hur and they say, listen, Moshe is not coming. Moshe died. And they use a word Elokim, which usually translates to God. They're looking for a God. But, the word Elokim in many contexts also means a leader. They're looking for a leader. They want a replacement for Moshe. They want a replacement for Moses. Hur starts yelling at them. And he says, what kind of thing is this? You guys are miscalculating. You don't know how to do it. And stop claiming that Moshe is dead. He'll be back. So some of the real angry Jews killed Hur. It's a part of the story the Torah does not clearly write. Rashi sees it in the words of the Torah that a few times it mentions that there was bloodshed, someone was killed, and this is it with the reference that Hur, the leader, the replacement leader, the substitute leader for Moshe's nephew, was killed because he stood up to the people. So now, here's, by the way, Don, this will help you understand where Aaron is coming from. Aaron, the other substitute leader for Moshe, now realizes if he's going to do the same thing, then the same thing's going to happen to him. And what's the problem if it happens to him? Obviously, he doesn't want to get killed, but more than that is that no one is going to be here to stop them from doing this big mistake. So he comes up with a very clever idea to stall. What do people really like? People really like money, gold, silver, and it'll be very hard for people to part with their money. He said, definitely all the people who are coming here are men. If I tell them, go get your wife's jewelry, that's like a double stalling. You understand? It's jewelry. No one wants to give up jewelry. No one wants to give up money and valuables. But definitely they don't want to give. The wives don't want to give. The wives are not part of this. You understand? So by the time they get to convince their wives to give up the jewelry, and they bring it to me, it's almost like a double miracle, right? No one wants to let go of jewelry, especially the wives who aren't even complaining. So he comes up with this idea, and it's sort of, it's a brilliant idea. The problem is, so he tells them all, you know what? You want to make a new leader? Give me your money. Hoping that they would never part with their money, especially their wives' jewelry. So he tells them, get the jewelry from your wives. But instead of going to their wives, all the jewelry that the men were wearing, in other words, all the gold and silver that they were wearing, maybe in their garments, maybe in their buttons, I don't know exactly, whatever it was, maybe in their rings, maybe in whatever it was, they gave it right away. You see, so both of his plans of stalling, of asking for money, number one, and number two, for the wives to give it, weren't working. So he does something else. He says, okay, now let's make a fire and let's melt all this gold. And Aaron, in almost like presenting himself as noble, says, listen, I don't want anyone else to help me. I want to do this myself. See, if you would have a lot of people helping, then it'll go much quicker. This whole thing is an idea, is a way of stalling, that the next day when Moshe comes, everything will be good. So Aaron starts slowly melting the gold and the silver and carving, or gold actually, Egel Hazav, right? And gold, and carving out the image of an egel, of a calf. Now, I'm just going to take a small footnote here. Why a calf, right? It's a little bit strange. Why would you make an image of a calf? So I want to give two answers. Number one, which seems to be a lie. I hear this answer from a lot of people. I'm not sure exactly where the original source from this is, but that it was the Jews asked for a calf because they were used to serving animals in Egypt. So for them, if they were looking for a substitute leader, they sort of went back to their Egyptian nature, which was to have animal leaders, and to make a statue of a calf was very part of their perspective, their mentality.
The Egyptians worshiped cattle, did they not?
That's exactly, we mentioned that, yeah. Oh, I'll get to that in a second. There is one more thing, which is very interesting. And it's a very interesting part of the story, which is also, all these details seem to be like, almost like there's a little bit of God instigating here. Let me explain what I mean. I need to rewind a little bit the story, not in this week's parsha, but when they were leaving Egypt, everyone was getting gold and silver. They're all ready to leave. And then Moshe was the only one who was busy with something else. What was he busy with? He said, we cannot leave Egypt. Why can't you leave Egypt? We made a promise to Joseph when he died, that we're going to carry his bones out of Egypt. Where is Joseph's coffin? No one knew where it was. No one knew where Joseph's coffin was. The Egyptians took it, and where's Moses going to get it from? So what he does is like this. He finds an old lady, a woman who's around for many years. Her name is Serach. She's the daughter of Asher. She's from the real, original Jews who came down to Egypt. And he asks her, maybe you know where the coffin is? So she says, yes, I actually do know. I remember that the Egyptians took Joseph's coffin and put it in the Nile River. They sunk it in the bottom of the river. I mean, for a few reasons. Either because they specifically did not want the Jews to get it, because they knew that it was sort of a stipulation that the Jews have to leave, it could only leave if they leave with the coffin, so they try to make it impossible. And number two, an idea that we've mentioned in previous classes, the Egyptians saw the Nile as their source of blessing. They saw Joseph as someone who brought blessing. They wanted to put Joseph in the Nile as to increase their blessings. Okay, so you hear this? So where Moses is going to now go scuba diving? Or how is he going to get? No, where's he going to get this coffin from? So Moses takes a tas. A tas is like a plate, a silver plate, a gold plate, metal plate, whatever it is. And he carves out in this plate 2 words. Alei shor, let the ox rise. You see, Joseph, before his father passed away, before Jacob passed away, you know, all of the children or Jacob's children got a different animal. Not all of them, but many of them were described, their personality and their future was described by using a metaphor of an animal. And Joseph was compared to an ox. So he wrote on this plate, let the ox rise. He put it in the water, and sure enough, he sees something floating. A coffin is floating. By the way, did they get this in the movies? I don't think so, right? Probably not. You know for sure not. Okay. Okay, but this is in the Gemara. It's authentic. So Moses takes it. There was someone watching this whole thing who sees the plate, and he says, oh, that's quite a good souvenir, right? And he takes the plate. So he leaves Egypt with this plate. Now, just a little background who this one person is. It's a very sad story, actually. Who's this person? His name is Micha. Micha was someone who actually was brought up by Moses. In what way? His life was saved by Moses. Moses at one point was crying to God and saying, why do your children deserve all this suffering? Their children are being killed and cemented into the walls in Egypt, into the structures that they're building. So God was telling Moses not to question, but Moses was questioning. So God says, you know what? Save a child. So Moses goes, God permits him, however it actually played out, he takes a child that was going to be killed and cemented into the walls in Egypt and rescues the boy. That's Micha. And this Micha obviously hung around Moses as the person who saved him, and now gets this souvenir. Presumably, maybe you want to add a little to the story where we're holding now. Moses is away for 40 days and 40 nights. Everyone thinks Moses dies. Moses is dead. He feels probably particularly hurt by the fact that Moses is not coming back. And everyone is contributing gold and silver or jewelry. So he takes this plate and he throws it in. And out comes an ox. Because it says, let the ox rise. Have you ever heard this? This is a Gemara. This is how it, I'm not embellishing. And this is actually quoted in Rashi. Rashi briefly says this story the way I just said it. He says, let me just find it so we have exactly the terms. Yes, he says that Micha, let me just actually start from the beginning. He says, some say Micha was there. Who was Micha? He was the boy who was taken out of the buildings from the cement in Egypt, and he had this plate that Moshe wrote on it, let the ox rise, to take out Joseph's coffin. So he threw it into the fire, and out came a calf. So now, you understand why it's a little bit miraculous, right? In other words, almost like magical. The fact that she throws it into the fire and it comes out. So now, let's go back to our story. I told you it's dramatic, right? This week's parsha is quite a dramatic parsha. Now Aaron sees this. He's standing in front of an idol. He's standing in front of, it's not yet an idol actually. It's at this point it's just a structure, a monument of some sort, an image. So he says, okay guys, go to bed. We'll tomorrow will be a celebration. He says tomorrow will be a holiday for God. He says something and he actually means it. He's saying tomorrow when my brother comes back, this whole thing will be behind us and Moses will be back. I want to add a little bit here, which I haven't seen this written, but you could maybe add to. He told them the next day, he remembers that at the giving of the Torah, it's written that the Jews slept in. So he says, maybe hopefully they'll sleep in again. And if they sleep in again, by that time Moses will be down. The problem is they woke up early. They were so excited about this new leader, this new image that they made, they woke up early and they started bringing sacrifices for this golden calf. And they drank, vayakumu l'tzachek, and they stood up for laughter. Rashi says laughter can mean two things: either immorality, or also, it's a reference to murder, the fact that they killed Chor. That was the laughter. In other words, the term l'tzachek is used in other contexts to reference murder. So now, so you understand now. I just hope, at the way we understand the story up until this point, we have a strong defense for Aaron. Because he was all about stalling, and that's what he tried to do, and he pretty much did until the very end. There's one other part of the story that I want to add, that Rashi says, which is also obviously learned from the Torah itself, a defense for the Jewish people. And that is, the Jews themselves were not ready to serve this calf, were not ready to celebrate. They weren't ready to make it into an idol. However, there was a group known as the Erev Rav. In English, we say the mixed multitude. In other words, Egyptians that when they saw all the amazing miracles in Egypt, the plagues, the incredible things, they said, I want to go. We want to go as well. We want to join the Jews. See, Glenn, you pointed out before, many Jews didn't want to leave, but some Egyptians wanted to leave. So it was Moses' idea to say, listen, you want to come? Come. You want to come? Come. In other words, it wasn't something that God told him to do, but he thought it was the right thing to do. It was these people, these Egyptians, who you could imagine in their previous life, previously in their life, they were stooped in this lifestyle of idol worship. So they're very familiar with when you see a golden calf, what do? So they were the ones who turned to the rest of the people and said, Eila Elokecha Yisrael. They said, Jews, this is your God, the one who took you out of Egypt. This is the force. This is the spirit, or whatever you want to call it, the leader who really took you out, the God that took you out. So I hope from the way I share the story now, and I'm saying it exactly the way Rashi says it, we have slightly a different approach to it in terms of defending the Jewish people. So what's happening meanwhile on top of the mountain? Moses is there, about to come down with 2 tablets, carved and engraved by God, the letters and the words of the 10 Commandments. And God comes to Moses and says, you know something, your nation, and he says your nation. You know why he says your nation? He says those people that you accepted without asking me permission, they really messed up today, because they made themselves an image, and they're bowing to it, and they're celebrating it, and they're bringing sacrifices to it. And they're claiming that this is the God of the Jewish people. And God tells Moses as follows, says, I'm so angry that I want to annihilate the people, annihilate all the Jewish people, and recreate the nation from you. I'll make you into the new nation. Yes, Larry.
Which was the event that indicated that God would not allow this generation to enter into Israel?
That was the spies.
Later on.
Yeah.
This wasn't the final determination.
No, there's a lot to say about that. The two major stories of punishment, you might want to say, and it would be those two. There are other, but those would be the two. And what's very interesting is that there's a lot of parallel things, but I just want to point, since you mentioned it, I hope, I won't go too far into this, but in the story of the spies, it says over there that they would be in the desert for 40 years, correct? But if you do the math, it's only 39 years. You could say don't do the math, but well, what's up with that if it's supposed to be 40 years? So Rashi over there tells us that really from the golden calf story, there was already this idea of 40 years. So if you start to count from the golden calf, then you do have 40 years. Because it's retroactive, basically. You understand my point? My point is that these two events are sort of two sides of the coin. I don't know if that's the right expression in this case, but anyways, two parts of one whole. Yes?
It's interesting, we learned about certain punishments were lashes, and it's 40 lashes, but they wouldn't give 40, they only give
39 is very interesting how that relates. Very interesting. Okay, and I'm sure there is a connection there. Okay, so now Moshe hears this. Moshe has not yet seen the people. He's hearing this for the first time from God about what's happening. And God then says a very interesting expression. He says, Moshe, leave me alone, and because I'm angry. Leave me alone. Moshe didn't say anything. You tell someone, leave me alone if they're nudging you, right? You don't say, leave me alone if the guy's silent. So Moshe understood from there, God wants me to nudge. Because why else would he say, leave me alone? If he's saying, leave me alone, he's basically saying, here's your opening, go and nudge. So Moshe does start that. He says, God, why are you angry? He says also, forgive the people. And don't be angry. And remember the covenant, remember the bris that you made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he actually says something, he says, remember Abraham. You know why you should remember Abraham? You're saying the Jews went against the Ten Commandments, right? 10 Commandments that they heard directly from you. But the first Jew, Abraham, he was ready to sacrifice himself 10 times. 10 trials, right? You know that we spoke about this when we learned about Abraham. 10 different times throughout his life, he had nisyonos, tests, where he was tested in his faith. And he passed all 10. So these 10 should cancel out those 10. Very good. So the fact that Abraham stood 10 times by you, and he never got rewarded for that, now that his children, his descendants, didn't listen to the 10 Commandments, his 10 trials that he stood should stand for them and should protect them. Yes, Larry?
So when he put his son, he was about to sacrifice his son, the specific reward for that act of whatever that act was, that you would be like saying your offspring would be like the sands of the world. So in effect, how could God basically reverse himself, regardless of what the Jews did in the...
That's exactly Moses' claim. And by the way, and it works. Moses, it seems like God just wants Moses to say it. In fact, Moses actually has a little... everything I'm saying now is using Rashi. He says, you say destroy these people and start a new nation with me. You know that... He says, logically, I don't know how that works. Because... imagine you have a chair with 3 legs that's shaky. So what are you going to say? You know what? Take off all 3 legs, just put 1. Of course it's going to be shaky. You had Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, 3 legs. And you're telling me that the Jewish people are too shaky and I'm going to start them again from you. So now you want to build a chair with 1 leg. How's that? It's just going to be even more shaky. You see the interesting logic, okay, that they're discussing. So, and Hashem says, you reminded me of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the sacrifices of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or maybe even more importantly, I think this is in line with what Larry pointed out, you're reminding me of my promise, my word, you're right. I will not destroy them. What happens next is before Moses continues the conversation, he goes down the mountain, takes down the 2 tablets, and he comes closer to the camp and he sees what's happening, and he smashes these 2 tablets. One of the reasons why he smashes it again is also because ultimately it was these 2 tablets that were the documents, the contract in which it was written, this mitzvah against idol worship. But if you destroy the document, almost like you destroy the evidence, so then there's no breach of contract because there's no contract. So Moses, as a defender of the Jewish people, smashes these tablets so there should be no trace of them. Yes, Charlotte?
But I thought God didn't want him to be angry. Or did I misunderstand?
No, there are two things here. There's just annihilating the people, and there's the punishment for the people who did the crime. You understand what I mean? There's two things. There's the people who actually did the serving of the idols, they were punished. And they were killed. The original argument that Moshe has with Hashem is more specifically about the idea of annihilating the people and starting from new. Annihilating the people would mean that also the Jews that were not involved, that's number one, women who were not involved at all, children who were not involved at all, and Moses would start a new nation. That is what the first thing Moshe counter-argued. He came back with an argument.
But why would he want to destroy the tablets?
So I said, because the example that Rashi brings is of a woman who was engaged, or had some sort of document, of marriage document with her husband. And in that case, the husband is the king, is the way Rashi says it. And then people started saying that this woman, who's supposed to be the king's wife, who's going to be the king's wife, did some improper things. So what did the king's friend do? The king's friend took the document of the marriage and tore it up. This way, this woman wouldn't be judged as a married woman. Moses did the same thing.
But you're saying that that act was purposeful.
Yeah, it was
opposed to an expression of rage.
exactly. It was not, and it was not rage at all. And the fact that you see that, I'll give you two points. In this week's parsha, it says Hashem says, he refers to the breaking of the tablets. He says, Asher Shibarta, which means thank you for breaking the tablets. And another point is, you know what the very, very last words of the entire Torah, all 5 books of the Torah, the very, very end. You remember, Larry?
He still had his strength or his power.
Yeah, so even after that, the very, very last words of the entire Torah are puzzling. And it goes like this. It says all the great things that Moses did before the Jewish people. La'einei kol Yisrael. What does it mean that the great things he did in front of the eyes of the Jewish people? It's a reference to the fact that he had the audacity to break the tablets. So in other words, you're talking about a eulogy, right? A eulogy for Moses. What do you think the entire Torah concludes with? Moses was such a great person, he broke the tablets. It's obviously, it was not because of rage. There was a calculated effort here in the smashing of the tablets. If it was about rage, that would not be in his eulogy.
I thought he felt the people didn't deserve it, and that's why he's...
That might be on a more simple level, but what I want to go, and the way Rashi says it here, is to take it a step further. He wants us to understand that it actually was calculated in the sense it was part of Moses being Moses. Moshe being Moshe is to defend the people at all costs.
But meanwhile, wasn't he precluded from entering Israel because of an act of rage? Instead of him speaking to the rock, he hit the rock. So in that case, it was an emotional statement.
Interesting. And you know something? Even in that case, when it's not for this week's parsha, so I don't want to get caught up in it, Rashi wants us to know it was calculated as well. It was a calculated thing that he did. But we will focus on that. I hope you'll still be here then. I'll have to send you that class maybe, and now that we have it recorded, I could give you a link. Okay. Okay.
But was he so intelligent he wouldn't let rage take over?
Yeah, Moses was not impulsive. He was not impulsive. And
He was humble.
He was humble. I'm saying not impulsive in the sense that he didn't just work off impulse. I'm angry at Moses was Moses, and especially in this case, where we have several reasons. I mentioned 2, but you could mention a few other ones as well, where it was deliberate. Moses' smashing of the tablets was a calculated effort to defend the Jewish people. That's what Moshe lives for. He sees himself as the defender of the Jewish people and being their leader, and There are no Jews without Moses, there's no Moses without Jews. He sees himself as a head for a body.
Interesting.
Now, you made a comment that there were certain Jews that were killed for building the calf,
Correct, yeah, for serving the calf.
Serving the calf.
In other words, for actually committing idol worship.
Okay.
Even in that, there were 3 stages. I'm looking at the clock. I'm saying, oh no, it's going to be a long one. But the 3 levels. You had some Jews that were warned. You see, in Jewish law, if for someone to get capital punishment, there had to have been 2 witnesses, not only 2 witnesses that saw the act, but those 2 witnesses also have to be the ones who told them, don't do it.
Those are rabbinic laws, though, aren't they?
No, we learn it from the Torah. But not only do we have to say, don't do it, they have to say, don't do it, because if you do it, this is going to happen to you. So the people who went through that process, they were actually killed by court. You know, it was sort of by law they were killed. Then there were those that served, but there was no one. There was no one who saw, right? Or no one warned them. And then the third category were those who no one saw. Like there were no witnesses that saw that they did it. And they were all punished in different ways, like with a plague. And the third one is actually the most interesting, but I don't want to get into it now. But the different levels of how they were punished for what they did. But again, I wanted to stress something because this is the mistake that sometimes comes to mind. The original defense that Moshe was saying in his argument was against annihilation of all the Jewish people. That's what, and he was successful. He was successful, and also, if you want to put it like this way, he was defending the other Jews for not protesting. Understand? For not protesting, because God was saying, what about the rest of the Jews? They should have protested. Moses said that was his defense. His defense was for them, you should remember the promise that you gave to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and these are your people, these are their children. It's your promise, keep your word.
That must have been a smaller percent.
In numbers, actually, it's a bigger percent because the ones who were killed were 3,000. The ones who actually committed the crime. Your fruit, you have to give truma to the Kohen. In other words, a certain amount. How much? 2%, let's say. You'd have to give to the Kohen. But the Kohen would have to eat it while being pure. So he would have to make sure that he was pure before eating this fruit, because it's sort of holy fruit. As an extension of the restriction that involved truma, our sages ordained such a washing even for ordinary produce, so that people would accustom themselves to washing their hands whenever they eat, and thus would not forget to wash for truma. You hear that? It's so interesting. Because when eating teruma, your hands would have to be clean. When I say clean, I don't mean physically clean. I mean spiritually pure. Therefore, they said, listen, all fruit, not only teruma fruit, not only teruma produce, let's stop using I shouldn't use the word fruit. All bread, make sure you wash your hands before. Our sages made this decree universal since they did not wish to differentiate between Kohanim and Israelites who may not partake of truma. Do you understand that? It's only really for a Kohen. While eating truma, he has to make sure his hands are pure. But by extension, it became all bread. And by extension, it became all Jews. Do you realize how distant that is? It's interesting. It started off with the idea that a Kohen, when eating truma, again, what's truma? Truma are the gifts of food that the Jewish people would have to give to the Kohen. So the Kohen getting it would only be able to eat it while being pure. But by extension, the rabbi said, you know something? All bread has to be eaten pure. And not only for a Kohen, whoever you are. But now, we still have a question, what about nowadays? Nowadays, there's no truma. The Kohen, no one is really pure. So, why are we still washing our hands nowadays when, it's not in temple times now? So here's where it gets even more interesting. At present, Kohanim may not partake of truma because of ritual impurity. Nevertheless, this ordinance was not nullified, so that the children of Israel will be habituated, will be used to, will have the habit to eat in a state of ritual purity when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt. May this take place speedily in our days. You understand what that means is that we are all washing our hands before eating bread, because when Mashiach comes, may it come very soon, we're going to have to get used to eating bread pure. You understand this chain of things? Are you following me? That it starts off, truma has to be eaten with pure hands. The rabbi said, so not only truma, any bread should be eaten with pure hands. Okay, but this is all about a Kohen. You know what? All Jews have to eat any bread with pure hands. Okay, but that's only when there's a temple. No, any time. Because we're always anticipating for the Beis Hamikdash to return, for the temple to be built.
Question. When we washing, okay, we have in mind we're going to make our moitzi, we're going to eat bread, a challah, whatever it is. But somebody who doesn't eat bread, he still has to go?
No.
Wash it.
It's only bread made of challah, made of the 5 grains that the Torah describes as grains, and that would be the only requirement for washing your hands.
But it has to rise.
Is it because of
No,
challah?
why? A matzah also you have to wash.
Is it because the challah was originally one of the items that was put into the...
No connection. It's interesting, but it's not, maybe that has like a significance from another way. That's why on Shabbos we have challah. But no, the direct connection here of washing hands to bread is because the Kohen had to have pure hands. It became a universal law that everyone has to have pure hands when eating bread. And not only during the temple times, but even nowadays. But I don't want, from the way I'm saying it, and I'm thinking while I'm speaking, that it should sound like, oh, so what's the big deal? So don't wash. It's not. It seems like it's such a stretch. Ultimately, it's a mitzvah from the sages. We make a bracha when we do it, when we wash our hands. So without going into the background of how it came to be, when we sit down for a meal with bread and we wash our hands, we are absolutely doing a mitzvah. So in no way do I want to, discredit the greatness of that mitzvah. I'm just saying that the background and how it came to be a mitzvah is a very interesting web.
But bread is also one of few things that you touch with hands.
That's true.
Other things
You're making a good point, because a lot of things you don't touch with your hands. Use utensils. So specifically because it's something that you use with your hands, you eat with your hands, it's more likely that you would become impurity, right? Yeah, true. That is true.
Rabbi, what's the custom? Because certain people, they have a whole challah. Instead of cutting, they start, crumbs, break it and give here and there. So where does this come from?
I'm not sure, but I think it actually it's on the lines of Sfardim Ashkenazim. I think the Sfardim are into tearing it, where the Ashkenazim are into cutting it. It could be it has to. I have to look into it, but I'm going to tell you something off the top of my mind. I'm not sure, so please understand that it's a matter of like custom or societal custom. You see, in Arab nations where a lot of the Sephardim lived, that was the way. It was almost that was the proper way of eating and distributing food. In Ashkenazic countries, doing it that way was strange, and using a knife was the right way to do it. So I believe that it has a lot to do with the background of the nations where they lived and what was considered honorable. You see, you want to give with the challah, do it the most honorable way. But even Ashkenazim, if you go to a Shabbos meal, you'll always notice this, and it might first look strange. When the person makes the blessing on the challah, they're supposed to have their 2 hands on the challahs. So you might look and say, what's the guy putting his hands on the bread? I'm just saying, it's supposed to be that way. So you're right. Challah would be, or bread in general, is a food that's usually eaten with your hands. Yes?
I've noticed when people go out to eat in a restaurant, so the observant Jew goes over and he
Washes and eats the...
bread. But there's no bread on the table. He's not going to eat any bread. Nobody ordered bread. Nobody...
No?
No.
There's always
Usually in the kosher restaurants, they have a basket of
Right.
pieces of bread.
They do it. But why did he have to do it if there was nobody going to eat bread at the table? I mean, he wasn't like he was going to have a sandwich or he wasn't, you know what I mean?
But it has to
Wasn't
do,
having
but
pizza.
Maybe, I
it
mean,
has to do with Birkat Hamazon after.
yeah, maybe he wants to make a bracha, maybe he wants to make the blessings after, and maybe also, there's another calculation here, and I don't want to, I'm looking at the clock, wow, time flies today, so we're going to start wrapping it up, but in any case, there's another calculation here. Some people want to wash and eat a little bread, even if it's not part of their order, and then eventually make the after blessing. You know why? Obviously they're going to have to eat bread. They have to eat some bread. Did the person not eat bread, you're saying?
Just the bread at the beginning to, a blessing.
There's a certain amount they would have to eat, but we try to get in 100 blessings every day.
Oh.
So if you do the math, sometimes you'll have to rely on washing for bread in order to get your 100 number in.
I never knew that.
By the way, Halach actually does the math for us. If someone who goes to shul and prays, or not even goes to shul, we pray at home, but if someone prays the Shemona Esrei, right? You have 19 blessings right there. You have 2 blessings before the Shema, 1 blessings after the Shema. The math is all there to try to bring us to the point that we can almost get 100 a day. But some people, they rely on washing in order to get them there.
But the core quality, there must be the core quality of bread distinguishes it from other food, because bread stands apart in Judaism from other food.
Yeah,
It
it's
has a spiritual significance to it that no other food has, basically.
as being a staple of all meals.
Right.
Right. So, obviously you look down, you'll see there was a lot prepared in terms of halacha. But what I wanted to focus today was the halachas of washing. I'm just going to do this quickly. In other words, the type of vessel to use for washing, to make sure our hands are clean before washing, to try to use a lot of water, a full cup when washing, to do the right hand before the left hand, before making the bracha and rubbing our hands like that, and we're supposed to lift up our hands. Make sure not to wipe our hands on our clothing. Yeah, it says one should not dry his hands on his garments because this leads to forgetfulness. It makes a person forget things if they wipe their hands on their clothing.
Do you have to use a special cup?
Yeah. Well, not special. It just.
Well, I mean with the, the handle.
Can't have a spout on it.
Right. It can have a spout. You'll see if you see quote number 12 on the top of page 5 is all about the type of vessel that it should be, the type of cup that it should be. It's supposed to basically distribute the water all at once. If you have a spout, it's a problem because then it's so it should be a straight cup.
So you want to
Okay.
see, we go in the next room, we have 5 or 6 of them.
I'm going to conclude with a story.
You can't
The
wash
third-
out of a faucet, I think.
Oh, so I covered over here about the faucet. If you'll take it on number 20 is all about that. You cannot do a faucet. But let's say you have a big barrel that has a plug. It's a barrel of water, and you take out the plug, and a lot of water comes gushing out. So that first gush of water is considered human power. You understand? Because you caused it to come out. But once it continues flowing, then it's not. So if you're able to open it up and enough water comes out at once to cover your hands, then you could. But nowadays, our faucets obviously don't. The average faucet definitely doesn't. So we should not wash from a faucet. That's why we fill up a cup. Because it's all about, it has to be done through human effort and human power. What's known in Hebrew as koyach gavra. We have to be the ones to pour it. Okay. I want to share a story for the third segment. It's a beautiful story. And it has to do with the fact that in this week's parsha, Hashem forgives the people. And he uses an expression. He says, Moshe, I will favor when I wish to favor, and I will be compassionate when I wish to be compassionate, even to people who don't deserve it. I'll be compassionate and favorable to them, and I'll favor them as well. One of the great Hasidic masters was a person by the name of Reb Zusha of Anapoli. Mayor, where's Anapoli? You know Anapoli?
It's a town.
It's a town, I know, but is it in Ukraine? You don't know? Okay.
No.
Some people pronounce it Hanapoli.
No,
Okay. So I know.
never been there.
So Anapoli is it's a Zusha of Anapoli. Was a great Hasidic master. There's a lot that we know and we learn from him. In his city, he had a simple Jew who recognized the greatness of Reb Zusha and would often come to him for blessings, would often come to him for advice and for guidance, One time he comes to Rabbi Zusha's house, and his wife tells him, oh, he's not here. He says, oh, where does he go? Where'd he go? He said, oh, he went to his Rebbe. He said, you mean Rabbi Zusha, my Rebbe has a Rebbe? He said, yeah. He said he goes to Mizrich, to the Maggid de Mizrich, Rabbi Doiber Mizrich, and that's his Rebbe. He says, why am I wasting my time with the small guy? I should be going to the big Rebbe. So from then on, he starts traveling to Mizrich, and that becomes his new Rebbe. But he notices that simultaneously with that, his business starts going down. And after a while that he does the math and he realizes, this is what's happening, he comes to Zusha and he says, what happened? Ever since I stopped coming to you and started going to your Rebbe, my business went down. Why should I be punished for going to the greater Rebbe? So Rabbi Zusha answered a beautiful answer. He says, when you would come to me, you weren't thinking, who's greater, how great I am, is there anybody greater with me? You weren't being picky in me, right? You just came to me and you asked for a bracha and you helped me, whatever it was, because he would also help him financially. That's it. Now that you started getting picky, oh, this guy is not as great as that guy. Now I should go to that one, maybe he'll give me a greater blessing. So as a response, God started becoming picky with you. Do you deserve it? Do you really deserve it? You understand? Up until now, you weren't doing that to me, so God wasn't doing that to you. But now that you started being picky and very particular and very, choosing, this guy is not so great. That guy is great. So God, in response, we had this idea several times in our class that God works with us the way we work with others. That in response, God said, oh, so this is a picky fellow. A picky fellow, let's be picky on him. Does he deserve his wealth? Does he deserve his blessings? He said, you have to go back to the point where you were accepting another Jew. See, this is Zusha speaking in his humility. Accept me for who I am without being so picky.
His motives were pure initially, and he tainted his motives.
But it wasn't so pure. It was by coming from a place of being who's greater than who.
No, but I'm saying in the beginning he went to learn because it was important to him. His motives were pure. When he changed, his motives became
Right,
impure.
exactly. So I'll conclude over here, although we didn't finish the class. And as I think I mentioned that right in the beginning, it's a very full parsha and a very action-packed and I had a better word then, but it's very full parsha and very, in many cases, difficult parsha. But I hope today we have a better understanding of what took place in Parshat Ki Sisa and the story of the golden calf, as well as a little bit of the way Rashi helped us understand the defense for Aaron, the defense for the Jewish people. As well as the defense for Moshe for smashing the tablets and so on. We learned a little bit about the source of washing our hands before bread, and we shared a story about Rabbi Zusha of Anapoli and how God treats us in the way we treat others. I'd like to... Oh, the mask. I don't have time. I'll tell you after, okay? But I want to say that thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And especially on a day like today, on Purim Katan, we should have a year of joy, a week of joy. We should only have come together for joyous things. It's always nice to see everyone. Look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Actually, a very gorgeous moon.
Oh, that's right. By the way, that's another interesting thing. Being that we have a Jewish calendar, when there's an eclipse, you could know that it's the 15th day of the month. So tonight is the 15th day of the month, and I understand, a beautiful moon.
Gorgeous, absolutely.
It's called. I think they say that such a close proximity to Earth, the next time it's going to be 2026.
Really?
Yeah, I read that somewhere.